Welcome back to a Life Under Construction podcast. I'm your host, Rhoda Daniel, and I'm extremely grateful to have you join me today for yet another episode of Season 2. Season 2 has been all about man's search for meaning, so if you haven't watched the previous 5 episodes, feel free to stop this video, go back and watch the other episodes. But if you are someone who is looking for meaning and purpose in your life, you're looking for fulfillment and satisfaction, then this is a good episode to start with as well, because today we'll be talking about life and death, or should I say death and life, because I believe that if we want to live a good life, we need to start with thinking about our death. Now, this is not something new. This is not something that I have come up with. This has been talked about in a lot of books. If you go to a life coach, if you go to any of those people who help you plan your life or envision your future, they will all start with this exercise. They will ask you to imagine your death. They will ask you to imagine what you want people to be saying about you when you die. And then they will ask you to work backwards and to check how you are currently living your life. When I was younger, when I was in my 20s, I wanted to be buried at sea. And I wanted my tombstone to read, Rhoda Daniel, buried at sea. Well, it sounded good to me at the time. And even though I still want to be buried at sea, I realized that a tombstone, or what is written on the tombstone, is a statement of how you lived your life. Buried at sea was not a statement that was going to describe my life. It was going to describe my death. So I had to rethink about what I wanted to be written on my tombstone. I had to ensure that I lived the kind of life I wanted, so that someone, someday, after I died, would write something meaningful about me. So let me pose that question to you today. Even if you might not have an actual tombstone when you die, what is it that you would want people to say about you? What are the words that would describe the kind of life that you lived on this earth? If you were to die tomorrow, would people say the things that you want them to say about you? If you're not sure about that, if you haven't thought about that, don't worry, you still have time. Not so much time, because we don't know how much time we have on this earth, but the sooner the better. So think about your death. Don't spend too much time thinking about how you will die, because I know a lot of people have fears and anxieties about how they'll die, but none of us have control over that. So let's not think about that. Don't also think about the day you will die, because again, we have no control over when we are going to die. Though, I recently found out that there is a website where you can enter in all your information. I think it has your date of birth, it has your BMI and things like that. And it will tell you the exact date you're going to die. Now, I wouldn't trust that website, and I don't know why it exists, but let's not talk about when you will die. Think about what you're going to leave behind when you die. Now, I'm not talking about leaving behind debt. I'm not talking about leaving behind assets. Let's not talk about those things. Let's forget about the practicalities, the logistics, or the emotions related to death. Let's forget about all those things. And let's just think about what will people be saying about us at our funeral. If they had to give a speech, what would they say? If they were consoling your spouse, what are the words they would use? If your spouse was thinking about you, what would they be thinking? What is the impact you will be leaving in the world? What is going to be your legacy? Think about that. Think about what your spouse and your kids would say, your immediate family. What would they say about you? Think about what your friends would say, the ones you spend a lot of your time with. What would your work colleagues say? And finally, what would your community say? This might take some time if you are doing this seriously, so feel free to pause this episode, go take a notebook and write down what exactly it is that you want all these 4 categories of people to say about you when you die. I know it's a morbid exercise. It's something that you do not want to think about. And probably all your fears and anxieties are bubbling up to the surface because you're like, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. All of us are going to die. It's going to happen one day. So again, leave behind the logistics, the practicalities, the emotions of death, and focus on what is the legacy that you want to leave behind. And I'm going to still be here if you pause this video, and you can unpause it and get back to me once you're done. If you plan to do this exercise after the episodes, that's fine as well. But once you do this exercise, once you put down who is it that you want to be remembered as, take a honest look at your life right now, today. Not your life in 5 years, not your life in 10 years, your life right now. And judge for yourself whether if you were living this life and you were to die tomorrow, would these people say these things about you? For many of us, probably, our current life and the life that we want to live does not match. Some of us think that we have more time. Maybe it doesn't match right now, but someday it will. Someday I'm going to be living this exact kind of life that I can envision. But there is no guarantee of time. There is no guarantee whether I, filming this podcast, am even going to live to upload this podcast. I don't know. You don't know. So if you are thinking that I have time, I want to remind you that you might have time, but you might not have time as well. So it's time to buck up, take those points that you have written down, and start living that kind of life right now. Some others of you think that it's too late to live that kind of life. You might think that I'm married, I have kids, I have commitments, I've already come halfway through this journey of life. I can't suddenly change paths. I can't suddenly change tracks to become the person that I want to become. I'm stuck here. To you, I say, it's never too late to become the person that you were meant to be. It's never too late. If you decide today that this is the kind of person I want to be, change tracks. Who cares? It's better to look stupid today than to grow older and look back at your life and regret every single decision that you have made. I read this in a book just this week. 50 people above the age of 95 were asked the question. They were asked just one question. If you had your life to do over again, what would you do differently? 3 answers emerged as a consensus amongst all the 50 people. They said, we would risk more, reflect more, and do more things that live on after we die. You know the things that live on after we die? It is the exact same things that people are talking about or will talk about at our funeral. The people that we inspired, the kids that we mentored, the community garden that we transformed, the school that we built, the widow that we helped, the kids that we raised. These are the things that live on after we die. And all of these 50 people said that if they could have done things differently, they would have done more of these things that actually mattered. So let's not get to 95 years of age. First of all, that's not even guaranteed, but let's not get there and then look back with regret. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for you. If you are listening to this podcast today, this is your do-over. This is your chance to take a very honest look at your life and think for yourself whether this is the life that I want to be remembered for. Take the time to reflect. Start taking risks. It is not the easy things that live on after you die. It's mostly the harder things that you have to do that live on after you die. But it is exactly these things that are worth putting your sweat, blood, and tears into. I hope you're still with me, and I hope that I've given you something to think about today. That's actually all I have to say on this topic, because it's up to you now. They say you can bring a horse to the water, but you can't force it to drink. And not that I'm calling all of you horses, but you get what I mean. I truly hope and pray that today you drink this water. Today you choose to live a life of purpose and meaning and fulfillment and satisfaction that will live way beyond your actual years. It has been almost 10 years since my brother passed away, and his legacy still lives on. His poems still impact people. His charitable trust still serves the community. He could have lived his life like any other disabled boy, and he could have died being known as just that. But he didn't. He used his 19 and a half years of his life to do something that lived beyond his death. If he, with all his limitations, could do it, you and I have no excuse at all. So let's stop giving excuses and let's get to work. Let's start reflecting. Let's start taking risks. And let's start doing more of the things that will live on after we die. Thank you so much for joining me today and listening to this short podcast. I will see you again next week with another topic that will help you live a life of purpose and help you live the life that you were always meant to live.